They laughed when I walked into that boardroom, called me the cleaning lady when I wore my best suit. 5 years later, that same man stood on stage, tears streaming down his face, begging me to save his empire. But here's what nobody knew about that day. I had a secret that would change everything. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you. Before I tell you how I went from invisible to indispensable, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story has a twist that nobody saw coming. Trust me, you'll want to see this through to the end. My name is Nadia Bennett, and this is the story of how rejection became my greatest teacher. I remember the exact temperature of that conference room. 68 degrees. I remember because I was shaking, and I wanted to believe it was just the cold. My hands trembled as I held the prototype I'd spent 3 years developing. A piece of technology that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their supply chains. I'd practiced my pitch 700 times. I knew every word, every statistic, every inflection point. The room smelled like expensive cologne and leather briefcases. 12 investors sat around that table, but only one mattered: Victor Ashford, billionaire tech mogul, the man who could make or break careers with a single phone call. I'd waited 8 months for this meeting. 8 months of emails, calls, networking events where I smiled until my face hurt, all to get 15 minutes in front of this man. I walked in wearing my best suit, the navy blue one I'd bought on sale and had tailored 3 times to make it look expensive. My natural hair was pulled back into a professional bun. I'd done everything right, or so I thought. The moment I entered, the conversation stopped. Not because they were ready to listen, but because I wasn't what they expected. I watched their faces change, watched them exchange glances that said everything without words. Victor Ashford didn't even look up from his phone. His assistant, Preston Crawford, a man with slicked back hair and a smile like a knife, gestured vaguely at a chair. "You can set up over there, sweetheart. Make it quick. Mr. Ashford has a tea time at 3. Sweetheart? I swallowed the word like poison and began my presentation anyway. I explained how my technology could cut logistics costs by 40%, how it used predictive AI to prevent supply chain bottlenecks before they happened, how I'd already run successful pilots with 20 small businesses in the tri-state area. I showed them the numbers, the testimonials, the projected growth curve that looked like a hockey stick pointing toward the sky. Victor Ashford finally looked up from his phone, not at my prototype, at me. His eyes moved from my face to my shoes and back again, and I felt myself being measured against some invisible standard I could never meet. "Sweetheart," he said, and I hated that word even more coming from him. "This is cute, it really is, but let me give you some advice. Stick to something more realistic, for someone like you." He emphasized those last 3 words like they were a complete sentence unto themselves. The room erupted in polite laughter. Preston laughed the loudest, slapping the table like Victor had just told the joke of the century. I stood there, my prototype still in my hands, feeling like I was 6 years old again, being picked last for kickball. "I have the data," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "If you just look at the performance metrics." "We've seen enough," Victor interrupted, standing up. The meeting was over. 13 minutes. I'd gotten 13 minutes. "Preston, show her out." I was escorted from the building by security. They were polite about it, but firm, like I was some kind of threat. On the street outside, I sat on a bench and stared at my prototype. This thing I'd poured my soul into, and wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe I was being unrealistic. But that was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, I pitched to 47 different investors. The answer was always the same: number. Sometimes they were nicer about it than Victor had been. Sometimes they were worse. But the pattern was clear. Nobody in that world wanted to take a chance on me. What I didn't know then was that Victor Ashford had made calls. Quiet calls, whispers in the right ears. He'd told people I was difficult to work with, that my technology was unproven, that I didn't understand the market. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. In that industry, his word was gospel. Banks wouldn't give me loans. My credit cards were maxed out. I lost my apartment and started living in my car, a 15-year-old Honda with a broken heater and a passenger door that didn't lock. I'd park outside 24-hour diners and code on my laptop until the battery died. Then I'd move to another location with outlets and do it all over again. My sister Rochelle called me every week to tell me to give up. Just get a regular job, Nadia. This isn't worth it. You're killing yourself for a dream that's never going to happen. She meant well. She was trying to protect me. But every time she said those words, something inside me hardened into steel. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd been working out of a co-working space, paying week by week with what little money I had left. The manager, a nervous man named Todd, approached my desk with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Nadia. We're going to have to ask you to leave." I'd paid through the end of the week. I showed him my receipt. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "It's not about payment. We've had some complaints from other members. They feel uncomfortable. Uncomfortable." I was sitting quietly at a desk, writing code, bothering nobody, and I made people uncomfortable. Later that day, I went to my usual coffee shop to work. Mrs. Liu, the owner who'd always been friendly, who'd given me free refills and asked about my progress, stopped me at the door. "I can't serve you anymore," she said quietly. "Mr. Ashford, he comes here for lunch meetings. He told me you've been harassing him, threatening him. I can't have that kind of trouble." I didn't argue. What was the point? I sat in my car that night, my laptop battery dead, my phone at 3%, my stomach empty, and I cried. I cried until there was nothing left inside me but this raw, burning thing that felt like rage and hope, mixed together into something dangerous. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't crying because I was giving up. I was crying because I was about to do something crazy. At 2 in the morning, I went to a laundromat to charge my devices and wash the one set of professional clothes I had left. That's where I met Dalton Hayes. He was a 53-year-old black man who owned a small manufacturing business, and he was there because his washer had broken and he couldn't afford to fix it yet. We started talking the way strangers do at 2 a.m. when they're both too tired to maintain pretenses. I told him everything, the whole pathetic story. I expected pity or advice to quit. Instead, he looked at my prototype, asked 3 incredibly smart questions, and said, "I think you're onto something. What do you need?" What I needed was everything: capital, manufacturing contacts, distribution channels, credibility. What Dalton had was a garage, a network of small business owners who trusted him, and a belief that someone should bet on people like us. We formed a partnership that night, 50-50. I moved my operation into his garage. We worked 18-hour days, sleeping on his couch in shifts, eating ramen and dollar menu burgers, surviving on black coffee and spite. I rewrote my code from scratch, making it leaner, smarter, more powerful. Dalton reached out to his network: small manufacturers, family-owned distributors, immigrant entrepreneurs who were ignored by people like Victor Ashford. We offered them my technology for free at first. Just try it. See what it can do. The first 100 businesses that used it saw their logistics costs drop by 37% on average. Word spread like wildfire through communities that the mainstream tech world never bothered to reach. Within 8 months, we had 50,000 users, real people, real businesses, real results. That's when Ashford Tech's biggest competitor came calling. They offered me $15 million for my company. $15 million. I could have sold, could have finally slept in a real bed, eaten real food, paid off every debt, and still had enough left over to never worry about money again. Dalton told me it was my choice, but maybe I should wait. Maybe we had something bigger. I thought about Victor Ashford's face, the way he'd looked at me like I was nothing, the way Preston had laughed, the way Mrs. Liu had turned me away from her coffee shop. They didn't believe in me when I had nothing. I told Dalton, they don't get to profit from me now. We turned down the $15 million and kept building. 2 years later, my company was valued at $800 million. I was on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Bloomberg Businessweek. The same journalists who'd ignored my press releases were now calling my office daily, begging for interviews. And Victor Ashford, his company was dying. While I'd been building the future, he'd been resting on his past. His technology had stagnated. His arrogance had blinded him to innovation. Younger, hungrier companies had eaten his market share. His investors were abandoning him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The news broke on a Wednesday. Ashford Technologies was on the verge of bankruptcy. Stock price in free fall. Massive layoffs coming. The golden boy of Silicon Valley was about to lose everything. That's when he reached out to me. First came the emails, professional at first, then increasingly desperate. I deleted them without reading. Then came the gifts. Expensive wine, flowers, a handwritten note, apologizing for any misunderstanding we might have had. I sent them back. Then he showed up at my office building. My security team, I had a security team now, removed him from the premises. I watched on the cameras as this man who'd once had me escorted out of his building was now being escorted out of mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. Preston Crawford, his assistant, who'd laughed so hard at my expense, had already been fired. Last I heard, he was working middle management at a company that made him as invisible as he'd once made me feel. Victor's desperation grew. He wrote a public article in TechCrunch praising my genius and vision. I didn't respond. He went on podcasts talking about how he should have listened to me. I still said nothing. My silence was louder than any words could have been. Then came the National Tech Innovation Conference. 10,000 attendees. I was the keynote speaker. The topic, betting on the underestimated. I wore a custom-designed suit in royal purple. My natural hair was styled in locks that fell past my shoulders. I walked onto that stage like I owned it. Because in a way I did. The applause was thunderous. I was 20 minutes into my speech, talking about how the greatest innovations come from people who've been told no so many times they stop believing in other people's limitations. When I saw movement in the audience, Victor Ashford was rushing down the center aisle. Security moved to intercept him, but something made me raise my hand. Stop, let him come. He climbed onto the stage, and the room went silent. 10,000 people holding their collective breath. Cameras everywhere, live streaming to hundreds of thousands more. And then Victor Ashford, billionaire tech mogul, the man who'd called me unrealistic, dropped to his knees in front of me. "Nadia," he said, his voice breaking. The microphones picked up every word. "I was wrong. I was so wrong about you. I sabotaged you because I felt threatened. I destroyed your reputation because I was afraid of what you could become. I'm begging you, please, help me save my company. Partner with me. I'll give you anything. Just please." Tears were streaming down his face. This powerful man, reduced to begging on a stage in front of the entire tech world. The cameras were eating it up. Social media was exploding. Everyone waited to see what I would do. I looked at him kneeling there, and I remembered everything. Living in my car, the co-working space manager asking me to leave, Mrs. Liu turning me away, my sister telling me to give up, the 700 times I'd practiced a pitch for a man who wouldn't even look at my work. I could destroy him with a single word. I could humiliate him the way he'd humiliated me. The entire world was watching, waiting for my revenge. Instead, I took a breath and spoke clearly into the microphone. "Mr. Ashford, 5 years ago you told me to stick to something realistic. I did. I created reality while you were buying illusions. Your apology, I don't need it. It doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't undo the damage you caused. Your partnership, I don't want it. I built something without you, and it's better for it." The room was absolutely silent. Victor's face crumpled. "But," I continued, "I will do something for you." Hope flickered in his eyes. "I'm going to offer positions to every employee being laid off from Ashford Technologies. They don't deserve to suffer for your mistakes. I'm also going to buy your patent portfolio at fair market value. Not a predatory price, but what it's actually worth. Your employees will have jobs. You'll have enough money to land on your feet. But I won't save your company, and I won't save your reputation. I paused, making sure every camera caught this moment. You see, karma isn't about revenge. It's about consequences. You taught me that I had to be 10 times better to get half the respect, so I became 100 times better. I don't need to destroy you, Mr. Ashford. You did that to yourself the moment you decided that people like me didn't deserve a chance. I gestured for security, and they helped him off the stage. Not roughly, just firmly. He went without resistance, a broken man who'd finally understood the cost of his arrogance. But here's the twist nobody saw coming, not even me. 3 months later, I received a letter, not from Victor, from his daughter, Lauren Ashford, a young woman I'd never met. She explained that she'd been following my career for years, that she'd been in that original boardroom meeting, fresh out of business school, observing her father's company for the first time. She'd watched him dismiss me, she'd watched Preston laugh, and she'd looked at my prototype and seen exactly what I'd seen, the future. She'd begged her father to reconsider, but he'd told her she was too young to understand how business really worked. So she'd done something I never expected. She'd secretly invested her trust fund into my company through an anonymous LLC during my early days. Not enough for me to notice in the chaos of those first months, but enough to help us stay afloat when things got desperate. She'd been one of my original angel investors, betting on me when her own father had bet against me. The checks I'd thought were coming from Hayes Capital LLC. That was her. The unexpected influx that had allowed me to hire my first 2 employees? Her. She'd believed in me from the beginning, watching from the shadows, too afraid to reveal herself because of her father's reputation. I couldn't let his mistake define my values, her letter said. And I couldn't let your brilliance go unfunded. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to tell you sooner, but I wanted you to know you were never alone in that fight, even when it felt like you were. I called her the next day. We met for coffee. And you know where? Mrs. Lou's coffee shop. Because I'd bought the building 6 months earlier and turned it into a community space for entrepreneurs, with free Wi-Fi, subsidized coffee, and meeting rooms available to anyone with a dream and a laptop. Mrs. Liu still runs it, but now she serves everyone, and she does it with pride. Lauren and I talked for hours. She's brilliant, nothing like her father. We're working on a new venture together now. Turns out, the apple can fall very far from the tree when it chooses to. As for Victor Ashford, his company dissolved. He took a job as a consultant at a mid-level firm. Not glamorous, but honest work. I heard through the grapevine that he's different now, humbler. Maybe losing everything taught him what I learned in that car all those years ago, that your value isn't determined by what you have, but by what you're willing to become. Preston Crawford works at a competitor, middle management, going nowhere. My sister Rochelle runs my marketing department now, and she tells everyone who'll listen about how she almost convinced me to quit. She says it to remind herself that sometimes the people who love us can't see what we see in ourselves. And Dalton Hayes, he's my COO and a millionaire in his own right. We still eat ramen together sometimes, though now it's the fancy kind from expensive restaurants. We laugh about the garage days, about the broken washer at the laundromat, about the 2 a.m. conversation that changed both our lives. I'm not going to lie and tell you that everything is perfect now. Success brings its own challenges, its own pressures, its own loneliness. But I sleep in a real bed, I eat real food. And when I walk into rooms now, people stand up, not because they're afraid of me, but because they respect what I built from nothing. Here's what I want you to understand. They didn't reject my idea. They rejected the package it came in. They saw my skin, my gender, my lack of pedigree, and they decided I couldn't possibly have anything valuable to offer. They were wrong, but their wrongness taught me something precious. When the world tells you no, it's not ending your story. It's just telling you that you'll have to write it yourself. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated or dismissed or told you weren't realistic, Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about turning rejection into rocket fuel. And comment below. Tell me about a rejection that changed your life. Because I guarantee you, someone needs to hear your story just like you needed to hear mine. Remember this: their no doesn't define your future. Your persistence does. Your vision does. Your refusal to accept their limitations as your own. That's what defines everything. I'm Nadia Bennett, and this is what happens when you bet against someone with nothing left to lose. They called me unrealistic. Turns out, I just lived in a bigger reality than they could imagine. Now go build yours.